Before proceeding with the formal business of the meeting, I would ask Maulana Qazi Abdulaziz Chisti to lead us in prayer.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون صدق الله مولانا العظيم. In the name of Allah, the Creator, the most merciful and kind forever. This is a book about which there is no doubt, guidance for those who know Allah, who believe in the unseen, who pray and spend out of what we have provided for them, and who believe in what He has been revealed to you, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and what was revealed before you and of the hereafter. Those are upon guidance from their Lord, and it is those who are the successful. I have recited the first chapter of the Quran which has been given for the mankind of the women. Once again, it is my great pleasure and honor to be here in this evening. I congratulate the Mayor of the Luton and Deputy Mayor and pray for them and congratulate them on behalf of whole Muslim community and on behalf of Jamia Islamia Gausia Trust.
Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. Before we begin, would members please sit in their allocated seats, silence their mobile phones, stand up when proposing and seconding items, switch microphones on to speak and off immediately afterwards. If there is an emergency, turn left out of the chamber, follow the green emergency exit signs to the main town hall entrance and assemble in St. George's Square. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Any members of the public present are entitled to take photographs, film, audio record, and report on the business held in public, but must not act in a disruptive manner. If they are to do so, they may be asked to leave. The first item of business is to receive the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on 10th and 18th July as set out on pages 7 to 14. If any member objects, please indicate. Otherwise, I will assume all members are in agreement. Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just on both of those occasions, I am understood that my apologies were provided, but they're not in the minutes.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Are there any apologies for absence from this meeting?
Mr Mayor, I've received apologies from Councillors Ali Khan and Councillor Mead.
Mr Mayor,
Yes,
Councillor Amjad Ali is going to be late, but he's on his way.
Noted, thanks. Members, please note that voting will be by exception. Rather than calling out each member's name to record their vote, I will ask members to indicate if they wish to vote against a motion. If no member votes against, I will declare the item carried. The outcomes will not be recorded in the minutes unless 6 members of the Council indicate that they wish for this to happen, in accordance with Standing Orders 21.2. Please note that I propose to take an item of urgent business in accordance with Section 100B, brackets 4B, of the Local Government Act 1972, immediately after agenda item 10.1, on a recalculation of the political balance following the resignation of a member from the Labour Group. The report has been circulated around the Council chamber. Councillors are advised that a review of polling station is about to begin public consultation phase. If any member wishes to comment on any polling stations or suggest suitable alternatives, please log your comments on the consultation portal from 2nd of October until 30th of October 2023. You will receive a message direct from the Electoral Services Manager shortly.
Mr Mayor, all members of the Council have been circulated with a list of items before the Council this evening which fall within the ambit of Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Any member affected should disclose the fact and refrain from voting on any question relating to those items. Mr Mayor, no Section 106 disclosures have been received, and I have also received the following disclosures of interest. Councillor Amy Nichols for agenda item 11.3 as a Director of Luton Rising.
Thank you. No, I think those with your hands raised.
So yeah, just to declare the same interest as the Director of Luton Rising, as well as Councillor Nichols.
And myself. Similarly, Mr Mayor, 11.3, Director of London Luton Airport Limited.
Similarly, Mr Mayor, Director of Luton Rising.
I need to declare an...
Councillor Bridget, you've got
Yeah, that's okay.
Miller behind you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'd like to confirm I'm also a Director of Luton Rising.
Noted. Yes, Councillor Bridget.
Under the same item, I need to declare an interest that I'm a permit holder within a car parking area. Yeah.
Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Bridgen to please ask his question of Councillor Javed Hussain.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The cost of parking for 1 week in a long-stay airport car park is £16 per day. Based on information provided to us by officers with the current resource constraints, the Vauxhall Park controlled parking zone is routinely patrolled twice a week, meaning the fine payable for a week would amount to £10 per day at most. What does the Council plan to do to improve the enforcement of the Vauxhall Park controlled parking zone and make it more of a deterrent to frequent abuse by those parking to use the airport, and by when? And sorry, this is a question to Councillor Javed Hussain, portfolio holder for Inclusive Economy, Sustainable Development and Highways.
Will Councillor Javed Hussain please respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, parking, I've just done the figures for, since 2001, August 2001, we've had 2,701 penalty charge notices. We've visited routinely 271 times, but additional to that, there was 800 additional requests, 899, which works out at 11.1 visits per week over a 105-week period. So we obviously, and we've got 32 full-time staff, we're only carrying 3 vacancies. We will constantly keep a review on it, but I'm not sure much more because 11.1 is, and we've got to share it equitably across the borough.
Is there anything else that can be investigated to make the fines more of a deterrent?
So we're already at the maximum that we're permissible. Otherwise, we'd love to put it up, but we're already at the maximum.
Would it be possible to arrange for Vauxhall Park to be visited more often? I understand there are resource constraints, but certainly at the moment, I'm aware of residents reporting that cars are parked in a road weeks on end and there's only 2 or 3 tickets. So is this something that can be arranged?
I can discuss it with park enforcement, but as to, instead of the routine ones, we do 899, which is a lot of, so any requests, we will always send somebody out to try and increase that number of visits.
Thank you. One final question. The system has been quite reliant on residents reporting parked vehicles without a permit, and with the new permit system, that's not possible to do. Would it be possible to put a system in place whereby residents are able to check whether a car parked in their street actually holds a permit?
Absolutely on my radar to look at that.
Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Mayor.
So I now call upon Councillor Miller to please ask his question of Councillor James Taylor.
There is no denying that small and medium-sized Pardon? Ah.
Stand.
Sorry. So bloody...
Can I please ask members, that's kind of my job to ask members to stand when they speak. Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, could I please ask all members to please stand when speaking so we know who's speaking. Please go ahead, Councillor Miller.
Thank you. There is no denying that SMEs play a pivotal part in the economy of our nation. At the start of 2022, SMEs made up 61% of the employment in the UK and turned over £2.1 trillion in revenue. I'm sure this Labour Council would agree that it's the mum and pup corner shops, the restaurants where you get your favourite takeaways, and the pharmacies where you're greeted with your name and smile, which are the backbone of this great nation. Why then does this Labour Council see it fit to increase commercial and shop rents by up to 65% in a 5-year period, when stats show the average increase of such properties was 32% in 10 years? During a time of economic turmoil and with low profit margins, you are expecting a corner shop in my area to stump up an extra £7,000 a year. This is the equivalent of an extra £35,000 in sales for an average corner shop, before considering all the extra liabilities such as business rates. I'm calling on this council in front of the citizens of Luton to cease exploitation of their monopolised commercial properties and lower to an acceptable level the rent so that its family-owned SMEs are around for decades to come. So my question is, how can this Labour-run council justify increasing rents on struggling businesses during a challenging economic time?
Will Councillor James Taylor please respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Miller for his question, but I would like to express surprise that we're getting a question about supporting business when in the last week we've seen a Tory government backtrack on its net zero applications, create turmoil for business by refusing to commit to HS2, and from a party whose previous Prime Minister is famously attributed as saying, forget business. I've cleaned that last one up a little bit. But to answer his question, the Council is required to obtain best value from its property estate, and this includes our commercial property portfolio. Rents within the portfolio are set by reference to comparable evidence from the local market, and determinations of the correct rent are made by a team of experienced and qualified chartered surveyors in line with the national best practice set by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Tenants who are dissatisfied with the proposed rental level may ask the RICS to appoint a third-party independent expert to determine the rent. On occasions when this has happened, the expert determinations have coincided with the Council's opinion of value, vindicating our approach, and it is important to note that Luton has been recognised as the best place in the country to start a new business. And it is important to note that the income received from our commercial properties goes towards the provision of vital council services like adult social care, and that any reduction in that income would lead to a reduction in the budget for these crucial services. And after 13 years of austerity begun on the Liberal and Tory coalition, with the local government bearing the brunt of this policy, it would be irresponsible of us not to seek fair market rents from our tenants whilst budgets are still being cut and demand increasing. Also, the council controls only a tiny proportion of the total commercial floor space in the town, a situation in which the council properties were available to tenants at less than the market rent, whilst others were paying the full market rate, would be extremely unfair. And Councillor Miller mentions economic turbulence. Let's not forget the reason why we're facing that economic turbulence is due to the actions of his party. We are still living through the effects of the chaos unleashed by the Trust mini-budget, which have seriously damaged the prospects of businesses and directly impacted family finances. So lectures from the other side of the chamber about supporting SMEs is a bit rich. Thank you.
So this is a common reply from the Labour Council whenever they want to cover their failings. I suggest that if they, to name a few, didn't spend £15,000 installing 8 bullards in Dallow, if they didn't spend £300 million in a transport system nobody asked for, if they didn't spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on diversity officers, or if they actually held large developers to account, then they wouldn't have to, instead of allowing them to cry poverty, then they wouldn't need to bleed small family businesses dry. However, this council has shown time and time again that they do not care about the family-owned shops. They don't care about crushing those who actually have the ambition to set up businesses, and they only care about developers who add more flats to our town without any concern for residents. For the life of me, I fail to see what benefits this Labour council or councillors get from appeasing such businesses to the detriment of the SMEs. May I also suggest there is a saving of £440,000 to be made with a complete abolition of every councillor's expense.
Every councillor's expense. I thank Councillor Miller for his response, but it fails to address his question, in fact, because the question was about we must set fair commercial rents for those businesses. There is no, we're not asking anything out of the ordinary from those businesses where the rents are increasing. They're increasing in line with commercial properties. If he wants to make suggestions for his litany of expenses that he wants to reduce, I look forward to hearing them at budget time. Thank you.
Well, if you defend increasing rent 65%, and I don't see how that's in line.
The council is only entitled to 3 supplementary questions subject to your discretion. At the moment, under standing orders, he's breaking every rule there is by just making statements instead of supplementaries to his question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, can I,
That's fine.
please, if you just respect the dice. So, if you could please follow up with questions and not statements. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Question, please.
So can I ask how you can defend increasing a corner shop's rent by 65%, essentially pushing them out of business? I know you've mentioned all of the aforementioned. However, all the shops in my area are fully owned by the council. So it's monopolised and you're not able to get a legitimate figure for commercial property. So how can you increase them in my area by 65%?
Rents are increased on a period of, I believe, every 5 years. I'll check your figure of 65%. I'm not 100% on that. But then that rent is then fixed for 5 years. Market conditions then determine what it will be next time. As we've seen, those rents are put forward, checked by the RICS and assessed for whether they are fair, and we have, in every single case where they've been challenged, they are found to be accurate and fair.
The next item is agenda item 5.1, Annual Report of the Standards Committee. I call upon Councillor Amy Nichols to deal with this item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation set out at paragraph 2 on page 15.
Is the motion seconded? Whoever seconded, could you turn your mic on, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. With regard to agenda item 6, there are no written questions this evening of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. There is no report of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority on the agenda this evening. The next item is agenda item 7.1, a recommendation from the Executive on the Youth Justice Plan 2023-2024. Would Councillor Tamina Salim please move the recommendations?
I move recommendation set out at paragraph 2 on page 34.
Is the motion seconded? Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak on the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 8.1, a recommendation from Audit and Governance Committee on the appointment of an independent member to that committee. Would Councillor Burnett please move the recommendation?
I move the recommendation set out at paragraph 2 on page 74.
Is the motion seconded? Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 9.1, the BLMK Integrated Care Systems Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I call upon Councillor Underwood to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation set out in paragraph 2 on page 77.
Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is agenda item 10.1, the creation of an additional seat on the Scrutiny Finance Review Group. I call upon Councillor Amjad Ali to move the recommendation.
I'm happy to move it on his behalf, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Is the motion seconded? Thank you, Councillor Malik. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item is a matter of urgent business, a review of the political balance and membership of committees following Councillor Aslam Khan's resignation from the Labour Group. I call upon Councillor Hazel Simmons to move the recommendation.
Mr Mayor, the report before Council this evening is self-explanatory and I move it as recommendation to Council this evening.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item of business is the notice of motion set out at agenda item 11.1. I call upon Councillor Khatija Malik to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This motion is a very important motion and as representatives of our diverse communities, it is our duty to stand against any form of religious intolerance and uphold the principles of respect, empathy and acceptance. Acts of burning religious scriptures not only violate fundamental human rights, but also erode the bedrock of religious tolerance and harmony. We must stand united in condemning such acts, and I would hope that you could all support this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded and reserved the right, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Shaw.
Yes, Mr Mayor. What's been happening in other countries is very difficult for everyone in here. But I'll read two quotes and see if you can tell me where they're coming from. One of the quotes is, "I will share God's truth with others in gentleness and respect. The selfish kind, for example, urges us to show tolerance to one another in love." A quote from another book, "Tolerance is an attitude of mutual respect and appreciation and does not restrict the freedom of others to do something," which contain the value of tolerance, namely freedom of religion and respect for differences. One of them comes from the Quran and one comes from the Bible. Both say the same thing, that we should respect other people's religion and be tolerant of those religions, not try and burn their holy books to make a cheap political point or cheap religious point. I would have hoped all this council tonight will have been united for what we're about, which is tolerance, which comes from the Quran and the Bible, which is about respecting each other's religions, which comes from the Quran and the Bible. If anyone wants copies of the quotes, I've got them both here. So I would have hoped that we would have all been united in saying we don't want that in Luton. It's got to be kept out of the town, and we are a tolerant town which welcomes everybody, no matter what their background is, their religion is, their colour. You are welcome in Luton, and we don't want happening here what's happened in other countries in Europe. Quran and the Bible both saying near enough exactly the same thing. I hope as a council we can all say the same thing. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. The motion is before the Council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried. The next item of business is the notice of motion set out agenda item 11.2. I call upon Councillor Franks to move the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. In moving this motion, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the other two group leaders for agreeing so readily to support it. It's here as a result of a plea from one of the independent members of Standards Committee who expressed the hope that somehow the government could be persuaded to reintroduce the ability of standards committees to impose sanctions on those found guilty of contravening the local code of conduct. In fact, of course, the government has not only abolished the ability of standards committees to impose suitable penalties, it's also removed the obligation on councils to have a standards committee at all. Why they did that, I never ever have been able to understand, but there you go. I don't think any of us here are suggesting a public stocks on Market Hill for people to throw rotten fruit at people. We're not suggesting dire penalties, but to be fair, a suspension from the council for a week or two, or maybe removal of a person from a committee where they've misbehaved themselves, would not in all circumstances be inappropriate. I'm happy to move the motion, Mr.
Before I ask the motion to be seconded, could I just please remind all those in the chamber to have all their electronic devices silenced? Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Yes, seconded. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Skipperhorn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to reiterate the point about the lack of sanctions, I had a look at the weekend at the sanctions available to the Parliamentary Standards Committee and the Commissioner. It amounts to 2 pages, from an informal chat to expulsion. If it's good enough for Parliament, we need to have some sort of sanctions. Otherwise, standards committees that actually do exist are nothing more than toothless tigers. And it's a long time that sanctions were brought back. They need to look at what they are, but we do need some sort of ability to sanction those who consistently and persist in breaking the code of conduct.
Do any further members of this council would like to speak on this? Thank you. The motion is for the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? The motion is carried.
Just announce the next.
Okay. The next item of business is the notice of motion set out in agenda item 11.3. I call upon Councillor Keynes to move the motion.
Councillor Keynes, if we could just give the remaining councillors time to vacate. Thank you. I've never cleared a room so quickly in all my life. The motion is before you, councillors. This residence parking scheme was set up primarily in Vauxhall Park in the old Crawley ward, now renamed Vauxhall Ward, to deter airport parkers. There's been a long-standing problem in that area with inconsiderate parking, weeks on end across drives and blocking roads. This had resulted in many fights, vandalism, and even a car set on fire. After many surveys and consultations with residents over 4 years, this scheme was put together and finally introduced. I would add that there was a Labour councillor with me that got this going. He's just left. The cost to residents, however, increased, and it is looked upon in the area as a cash cow. This problem is entirely due to airport operations and expansion, and would not exist if London Luton Airport was not there. The purpose of this motion is to request, after due discussions between the council and the airport, that they pay in full the residents' costs to enable the scheme to continue, and indeed extend it to Wigmore, South and Central wards. I would finalise by stating this is not an anti-airport motion. Indeed, for the airport to pay for these schemes would be the best public relations exercise. I would ask you to support it.
Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Madam Deputy Chair, and I reserve the right to speak.
Just seconded. Okay. Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Shaw?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The Liberals must be short of stuff to put in their Focus newsletter. They've got to be. It's only a few months since we passed a resolution. Under that resolution, requests the Executive to commission a comprehensive and strategic review of parking issues and their potential solutions across the borough. The Labour Party is bothered about all the borough and right across the borough. That's what we're looking at. You agreed that, and we said we'll come back with a review. And that review will be back here in the next couple of months. As soon as possible. Now, just a few months ago, you've agreed it. I don't know what's changed up there. I know what's changed. There's going to be an election next year, and I've got nothing to put in the Focus newsletter, because as a Labour council, we're doing so well in Luton, we're getting everything right. So what they're trying to do is drum up some business up in Wigmore and Vauxhall and everywhere else. You agreed that. You put your hands up that a report will come back, and you're getting a report back. I understand it's only 6 to 8 weeks off and it'll be back. So what I would say to the group is, reject this motion tonight for the simple reason we're doing the job we've been elected to do, which is come back for a report for all the town, reject the Liberals' motion and say, we'll agree, we've agreed it, we'll give you what you want, but we're not going to give you a Focus headline because you've got nothing else to put in it, because cleansing's going so well, parks are going so well, everything else is going so well. So we're not going to give you that headline. Reject it tonight, wait for the report to come back and have a proper grown-up discussion when the report comes back. One of the reasons we rejected it, and you know what it was, Chorley, Poets, Lucy, all suffer from the same problems with the hospital and everything else. And we think, being the innocent Labour group that we are, that a comprehensive report, looking at all the wards across the town, would be the fairest, most sensible way of doing things. But I'm surprised, you actually put your hands up for it. So now you want a report before the report, or you want to take action before the report, just to do your headlines. No, I'm asking everybody to reject the motion, stick with our original proposals, which was only passed a few months ago, that a full report comes back to this council, and then we have a look at that, and we treat all of Luton fairly, instead of just a little Liberal area where they've got nothing else to put in their newsletter. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Can I just, I mean, Councillor Shaw is covered in terms of the policy and the motion that was only not very long ago. I'm sure Councillor Keane has got a very good memory. He remembered that. We all agreed that we will come back and, review the whole of the town, because the problem isn't exclusively to the ward that you put in. Farley also does suffer from it and does have a similar problems. You know, people like me who live just off Delaware Road, very close to Luton Town, very proud that they have gone to Premier League, but I can't get into my road. Number of times I come home, my colleagues are aware of it. All the portfolio holder for what Javed has got now, I rang them many a times. I'm sitting there. I only a few days ago, because there was a match, they decided to block the road by Dallow Community Centre. So it isn't just a particular area where Liberal Democrats have their representation, so that they can have the focus going into that area. That's what it is. It's political. It's not taken into account the best interest of the people of Luton, which is what you ought to be thinking of, rather than being political every single opportunity that you can get. We agree, and I hope that all members of the Labour group will oppose it, because this is just being selfish in very small area of the town. The problem is everywhere, and I can tell you this, only about a few weeks ago, I passed an email to one of your colleagues, Councillor Amjad Ali today, where an abandoned car was left on Avebury Avenue for 3 months, yeah? And blocking just the corner on that area. Nobody bothered to take that. That also is part of the ward that you do represent. So you need to look at it, other areas of the town where there is a problem. And it's a town-wide problem. It isn't just strictly in that part of the 4 ward that you mentioned. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Stevens.
Sorry, got Councillor
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I've been involved in many residence parking schemes across the town, and the last one was the South Ward. And it's not a question of who to blame, it's how do you solve a problem. And you talk to the residents, and mainly it was due to a lot of town hall employees that were parking in Parktown. But we were determined to solve the problem, met with the residents, and told them that we could come in a residence parking scheme, and the permit will be, at that time, was £35. I know it's gone up a lot more now. And Tom's already mentioned the hospital area, Lucy, Cholney, Poets. You don't go to the hospital and say, it's your fault, people visiting the hospital, and staff at the hospital park in there. Although the situation's improved, you wouldn't take resources away from the hospital to pay for residence parking scheme. I wonder if it also applies to the residents in Wigmore. What would you do? Would they get allowed parking permits to those properties that rent out spaces for airport parking? I'd just like to say that it would be fair if Thomas said about doing the review for the whole of the town, and not some gimmick, or some impractical gimmick where you're asking the airport to pay for something that they shouldn't be paying for at all. I don't mind if they want to contribute to the road traffic order and the set-up costs, but to ask them to pay for residence permits, where will it end? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Javid Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Mayoress. I think most of the point has been made by my colleagues. I think we need to understand that we don't ask any other major employers to contribute, so why would we ask the airport? So I would ask my colleagues to reject it, because we don't want to be setting our precedent.
Councillor Roach.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. Just to sort of clarify what everybody else is saying, really, I'm surprised to see this back in tonight, because as Councillor Shaw said, we have looked at this, we have dealt with this in a way where there's going to be a paper come back to us. We've got to look at the whole town. Let's not forget equality, okay? Equality goes through the whole of Luton, and that's what we have to worry about, the equality in the whole of the borough, not just certain wards where it suits the opposition. We have to look at the equality all across the town. And as mentioned, We do not ask Luton and Dunstable Hospital to pay for the permits in Cheltenham, and we're certainly not going to ask the airport to do it. So, again, I will ask my colleagues to reject this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me first address to Councillor Shaw. We don't need any extra items for our focuses. We have plenty of things to talk about, and it's just a shame for you Labour group that you have to go back to the Eastern region to allow you to put your own leaflets out, because we don't see much going on in the wards around the town. So maybe you should think about that. Maybe you should be lobbying your own party so that you're allowed to put your own leaflets up. That's the first thing that I would like to say. The second thing that I would like to say, it's about time that the Labour group understood that it's not the same for all the wards that have these problems. Basically, the problem that is happening in the wards that is named is caused by outsiders. They go on the websites, and there are about 1 or 2 websites that tell people where to park in the town. It's by people also who are working at the airport, many of whom are living outside the town. That's not the same as the other schemes that you are talking about. And might I just point out to you also that think about the people that cannot afford to pay. How do we deal with them if we actually are going to install parking permits at £64.80 for one car, £84.80 for the second car, and £104.80 for the third car, when you sometimes have a family of 3 people with children living at home because they cannot afford to buy their own homes, and they are all commuters. So just think about that. Let the Labour Party think about that. Think about those that are on benefit in the wards that are concerned. I know, for example, Councillor Isles has to withdraw from here, actually thinking about Alton Gardens, where the people are on benefits, and what would be the case if the scheme comes in and they have to pay for it. I have to tell the Labour group that I have been knocking on doors throughout the ward to try and get a better result, a firmer result for the people of South about their views on resident parking. And what did they tell me? 12 o'clock at night, car pulls up outside their house, people walk out with luggage, and suddenly an Uber turns up or a taxi turns up and whisks them to the airport. Let me just remind you that the problem is getting worse. We are not against airport expansion, we are in favour of reasonable expansion, but the airport needs to understand that they are causing the problems in the wards concerned. And it's no good saying, we had a review, or we're going to have a review. Where is the review? I can tell you actually, so I understand from one of the officers, that the review is actually under discussion now. But I would urge you all to think about what you're doing. We have a separate situation in the wards concerned. We are affected, and I think there are a number of councillors here, including Councillor Burnett in Tennyson Road, where I know that they are affected by people also turning up, leaving their cars and going to the airport. By Councillor Isles in Alton Road, the same thing. The residents of these wards are absolutely fed up with what's going on. They need support in these difficult times, and I would urge you to think again and to support the motion. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I guess you're about to take a vote. I'm sorry?
Councillor Keynes, do you have anything to respond?
I would just like to thank Councillor Shaw. He's given us a number of headlines we can put in focus. Many thanks. Thank you. I hope you're not going to ask for payment.
Madam Deputy Mayor, understanding orders and request a recorded vote for the minutes. Thank you.
The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? Okay, as the vote against has been shown, members will be asked to cast their vote individually.
And the votes please be recorded in the minutes.
As they always are.
I'm sure they always are, Councillor. Thanks.
Stick your hands up. Thank you.
Councillor France will go through, as we always do, per member, so we can record, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, I will now go through the list of members in the chamber. Councillor Abbas. Councillor Ahmed. No. Councillor Ajisol. Councillor Umi Ali. Councillor Ambia. That was against. Just to confirm, against?
Against, yeah.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Fatima Begum.
Against.
Councillor Yaron Begum.
Against.
Councillor Bridgen. Councillor Burnett.
Against.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Against.
Councillor Farouk.
Against.
Councillor Franks.
For.
Councillor Fry.
For.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor J.I. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor M. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor S. Hussain.
Against.
Councillor Keynes.
For.
Councillor Khan.
Abstain.
Councillor Lovell. Councillor Mahmood.
Against.
Councillor Malik.
Against.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Moore.
For.
Councillor Nazar.
Against.
Councillor Petts. For. Councillor Raja.
Against.
Councillor Roche.
Against.
Councillor Salim.
Against.
Councillor Shaw. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Skeppelhorn. For. Councillor Steer. Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Underwood.
For.
Councillor Wynne. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is lost. I'm going to pause to allow everybody to come back that's left the room.
The next item of business is the notice of motion as set out at agenda item 11.4. I call upon Councillor Bassett Mahmood to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, I'm hoping we can get some cross-party support for this motion because it goes beyond party politics. It will signal to the residents of Luton how seriously we as a council care about two of the greatest challenges facing our communities, and those are the cost of living crisis and climate change, because there's some that would like us to believe in recent weeks and months that we have a choice between either the cost of living or tackling the climate crisis, and both have had a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged communities like Luton, but both have the same root cause at their heart, which is an expensive reliance on polluting fossil fuels. Now, what this motion does is it recognises the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis are deeply linked and require joint action and attention, and it means that our council agrees to make decisions on investment and procurement that, wherever possible, contribute to environmental and social benefits across our town. I think it fits perfectly with our Luton 2040 vision to create a carbon neutral, greener town by the year 2040, and it also requests that the government provide additional support for, you raised SMEs, Councillor Miller, greater support for businesses, individuals and families struggling with the cost of living crisis, and also to protect them against the unmitigated effects of climate change.
Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right.
Are there any questions? Are there any amendments? Does any member wish to speak to the motion? I've got Councillor Skeppelhorn first and then Councillor Franks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say, fully support this motion. Part of the biggest problem with the energy companies in this country is that they were sacrificed on the altar of privatisation and are now owned mostly by the French and German governments, who have managed to protect their citizens from serious increases in costs, while our government does nothing to protect us from inflation-busting rises in costs. Not only have they abandoned their climate change policies on the altar of car manufacturers, who actually have turned around and said, we're all ready to be all electric by 2030. So part of the drive of the economic crisis has been the huge increases in fuel prices, both for domestic use, for business use, and it behoves the government to do something very quickly to stop this. But I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Franks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As everybody knows, I've been involved in politics for a very long time, and I have to say that I cannot recall at any time in my more than 50 years involvement in the political scene in Luton, I cannot recall any time when the country and Luton's lower paid families have been in such a dreadful mess. I really can't. I challenge you, all of you, to give me the name of one single public service which isn't falling to bits after 13 years of Tory government. And it's a challenge you can't face because there isn't one. Today it's the prison service. It's been the criminal justice system, it's been the NHS, everything. There isn't a single public service that you can point to that isn't about to fall to bits after 13 years of cuts, 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 and more cuts. I'm quite convinced that all of my members will be perfectly happy to enthusiastically support this motion.
Councillor Shaw.
It's not often, Mr. Mayor, that I get up and feel in good company with the Liberals tonight. Not often it happens at all. But it is very worrying. What I've got to say, what David Franks has just said is 100% right. When you get a woman with 3 kids coming to your surgery who is looking for us to give her money for the electricity, we give her a voucher, but the first £19.60 of that voucher, when she's been to the shop, disappears into the meter because she's gone on to emergency credit, and the first thing they take back to make sure the electric companies don't lose any money is that emergency credit out of that. So she's going to go there, put a £20 voucher in, and end up, if she's used all her emergency credit, with about 60p's worth of electricity. That's the state we're in this country now, where you've got single parents, mums with kids, and working adults, people what are working for a living and are getting a universal credit top-up, getting sanctioned because they've gone to work and they couldn't make the universal credit appointment. They get sanctioned by this government who put those rules into place. So what you end up with is we're dealing with one now on Lucy Farm where the mum was in hospital with her child, and while she was in hospital she missed her 11 o'clock appointment on the phone and she got sanctioned. It was more important, making sure her child's all right in hospital or that appointment. It turns out universal credit people think it's the appointment is more important than the woman's own child. We cannot carry on the way we are. You've now got such a disadvantaged 20% of the people at the bottom of the pile, what we're doing absolutely nothing for. All over the town at the moment, you'll have all noticed you've got render being done, insulation on houses. But the government now has even announced that's going to be scaled back. Levi 4 is going. LA Flex is going. They're not going to get the money. But Alan Skeppelholm was dead right. The owners of the electricity companies, the owners of the water companies and everybody else will still get their share dividend, even though we're going to cut back on doing the insulation on the homes, what is desperately needed in this country. How does that make any sense whatsoever? We're going down, we've just started as a council, a community energy company. We're going down to Bristol to find out how they made it work. But the stupid part about it is we're not even sure we'll be able to get the money out of the government anymore because they've cut back on the LA Flex grant. Once that's gone, where's the money going to come from? You've got the worst off in the town getting even worse off. We can't, lucky enough, all the ones that live in housing in our properties is going to be Band C we'll aim for and we're going to get. But we're paying for that. The rent payers are having to pay for that. No grants are coming off the government to pay for that. It's the rent payers of the town having to pay to insulate their properties instead of getting grants off the government. My view is the quicker we get rid of this government and get some real feeling back for the worst off in the country instead of relying on universal credit and coming to us. As it happens, the Labour group had a very good discussion this afternoon with all the officers about what we can do in the future. And one of the ideas we'll come up with is join all them benefit sections of the council together. But it's no good joining all those sections of the council together to make sure we're giving a service if by the time we do that, the government is taking the money away with the other hand. And that's what's happening. LA Flex going, Eco4 going, Levi funding going. Where's the money going to come from to do what the government says is necessary? Where it has been coming from is part of it from the profits, excess profits made by the energy companies. But they want their share of it. They know the Tory government's going, so they want the maximum benefit out of those shares. That's all it's about now. But how can we talk about the environment, as a council, sit here and support water companies, pouring anything they want into the rivers, really, really polluting our rivers. At the same time, they're saying we've lost £560 million this year, the water companies. They hadn't. They paid out £570 million in shareholder dividends to the shareholders. So how can they lose five? It's just wrong. The system's gone wrong. The poorest are paying more and more for everything now, and what we're allowing them to do is get away with it. Sooner or later, it's got to stop. And the people what will benefit when it does stop are the worst off in the town, what will get the most benefit out of it. Thank you very much, Mr.
Are there any further members that wish to speak to this motion? Thank Councillor Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I fully agree with everything that's just been said there, in all fairness. I mean, we do have a Conservative government, as Councillor Frank says, and we fully agree with you, that has decimated public services in this country. This town, more than any, relies on public services, good public services, to support the residents. Without that, our residents in Luton are going to fall through the cracks. So we need to make sure that we look after our residents. The other thing, Councillor Skeppel, you're spot on, in relation to nationalisation. We don't want nationalisation in this country. That's what the Conservatives say. We don't deal with that, but we're doing it. We're paying the French government through our utilities, and the French government and then passing it on for cheaper electricity and water to their own residents. So nationalising does happen, but it doesn't happen with this government. Nationalise all utilities will protect the people of this country. And I think, by sound of it and a nod, I think we all seem to be in agreement, except for those three up there, I guess. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, I have to say I'm really glad that we're having this debate, that's it. Because we have walked in with our two eyes open to decimate public sector in this country. And the legacy of the millenniums and Generation X is not what their grandparents had. It's really disgusting how public sector is and how it's frowned upon. And maybe people still remember COVID, when key workers were all being clapped for, and we was encouraged by the leadership of this country to clap, to support them. It was public sector. It wasn't the private, it was the public sector going out there, running the buses, doing the NHS, being in the care homes that looks after our loved ones when they are elderly, when they're sick. It was them. But now, when we are asking for extra money, oh, we ain't got it. There's a saying, show me that you love me, don't tell me. The public, we told people that we cared for them. Like the climate change, yeah? When they had the discussion about climate emergency, yeah, we're all in it, we're going to do it, and now, oh, I can't find any money. Oh, I can't. Preston, I think recently there was analysis as to the level of lack of long-term planning and investment in this country for 40 years. That's why we ain't got no proper infrastructure. That's why we're talking about parking. That's why we're talking about public health. We're talking about everything because there's been nothing. And there was votes, there was a choice, there was a form of democracy taking place. And those who voted brought us to where we are now. That we have to say, nobody forced us to be in this position. Every 4 or 5 years, we've gone to the electorate. So the only people the young people can go to is to their grandparents, to their parents, and said, you just squandered all our future. And what have we got? Now they have to make the sacrifice. Now they have to think about where they're going to live, if they're going to afford something. They're living in accommodations that Thomas has to deal with, that their grandparents saw post-war. This is why it's important, climate, because the homes won't be able to cope with what's coming. Anybody seen the latest gales that comes along? Where's the infrastructures to deal with that? We have to do something on climate emergency, because if we don't, the earth will do it for us to remind us what we need to do. We're not in control of anything now. The earth is reminding us what is going to take place. So please support what has been put forward. It's been a good debate, but let us each where we can do something. Thank you.
Councillor Javeri Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet and say, bring on the Labour government. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers to this motion? Sorry? I've got Councillor Nichols. You had your hand raised. It was... Okay.
Back to Councillor.
The original speaker, so Councillor Bassett Mahmood.
Councillor Bassett Mahmood.
Thank you for your bipartisan support. I don't think there's anything more to say.
The motion is before the council. Does any member vote against the proposal? As a vote against has been shown, members will be asked. 6, isn't it? It needs to be 6. Less than 6. It has to be 6. Yeah. Right. In that case, the motion is carried. That concludes the business. Please can I ask everyone just to give me a second. Thank you. That concludes the business for this meeting.